Good afternoon, Murali sir. Are you there, sir? Murali sir? Yes, sir. Sorry. I have done it, sir.
Am I audible now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You are audible now.
Okay. Any echo, anything is there, or audio is fine?
Sorry, sir. Hello?
Echo is there or audio is fine?
No, sir. No, sir. No echo. It's completely clear.
Fine.
Yeah.
So
We'll
I'll just, okay.
Yes.
Can you enable that share screen also, because I'll share my slides?
Sure, sir. Sure, sir. I'll do it.
Is it visible now?
Yes, sir. It's completely visible.
Slides are 1 minute. It's, I think I'm in the second slide. It's moving. Slides are moving?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's
Okay,
fine.
fine.
We'll wait for another 2-3 minutes, sir.
No issue. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, a very good afternoon, dear participants. So we are going to start the fourth session of today's event. So before starting the event, let me introduce the speaker of the fourth session. Mr. Muralidharan has received his master degree in computer applications in 2002 from NIT Calicut. He is currently working as a joint director in Center for Development of Advanced Computing, Bangalore. He is pursuing his PhD in NIT Tirchi. His research interest includes network security, intrusion detection and prevention, high-speed packet processing, flow-based traffic monitoring and analysis, anomaly detection and network traffic classification. He has published more than 12 research papers in reputed international journals and conferences. He has participated in different international forums, including 92 IETE and Asia Pacific Advanced Network meetings. He is a fellow of the Institution of Electronics and Telecommunication Engineering, IETE. So with this brief introduction on the speaker, Mr. Muralidharan, I would like to welcome you on behalf of Department of Electronics and Telecommunication Engineering, Bangalore Institute of Technology, Rajiv Vakligar Center. Welcome you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are audible, sir.
Okay. Good afternoon, all. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me for these sessions, related to network security. I'm just in the presentation mode. I hope all are able to see my screens. The screen is visible, sir?
Yes, sir, it's visible.
Okay. Okay then. Okay. So thank you very much for inviting me for this session. So the title of this session is Intrusion Detection and Mitigation Techniques. So the agenda, 1 minute. Yeah, we'll start with the basic introduction. I think I gone through your schedule shared by yesterday. So it's almost covering the entire gamut of network security. So I'm not going to test those parts, even though I just mentioned these basic things are there. We'll concentrate mainly on perimeter security device, intrusion detection and prevention, intrusion detection research challenges and approaches, and some methods how we can identify these intrusions and how we can do some mitigation techniques, especially in the high-speed network scenario. So a brief introduction about CDAC. I'm working in CDAC Bangalore, Center for Development of Advanced Computing. It's a scientific society under MIT, Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology. And we have different centers all over the world, India. So basically our headquarters is Pune. And in cybersecurity, our major focus for R&D is related to network and gateway security, cyber forensic, endpoint security, biometric, public key infrastructure authentication system, cloud security, web security, and security. So these are some of the major research areas in CDAC Bangalore and other CDAC centers on cyber security domain. Okay. So here in CDAC Bangalore, our team is working mainly on network and gateway perimeter security device and cloud security, web application security, and DNS security. And SCADA security related aspects also we are looking here in the Bangalore centers and this PKI and cryptographic techniques. Okay. So I just start with some of the basics of history of internet. We already know, but I think we'll just start with that. Then we'll get to know from where we are currently now. So as you see, this started in 1969. They are connected 4 different nodes as a network components from different universities in US. And this is the what we call the starting of the internet or networks. So in 1960s, packet switching is invented by Paul Baran and Donald Davis. Even though it is a parallel approach, almost same time, both of in the same technologies, like packet switching technologies. And later, ARPANET came into picture in 1969. And the proposed speed of ARPANET at that time is 50 kbps. Okay. Now we'll check the current scenario in internet. We have around 7.89 billion population. Out of that, 5.29 billion people are using these networks and related technologies, mobile connections and all. And internet uses 9.88 billion and around 4.55 billion people are using active social media uses. These are the present scenario in the internet. So I just showing a live status. I hope it will be available there. The screen is available, means visible now. So it will show the live status of internet. Otherwise, if it is not available, I'll just share later the screen. So it will say the current status, how it is going, and what is the growth. So how much data it is transferring. These are the huge or massive data volume it's handling through the internet and the present scenario. And in the attack scenario, like at the same time, even though people are using internet heavily, and this attacks is also increased. So in the current statistics, what I'm showing, it is showing like the web hacking today's status 1.43, 116. That means more than 1 lakh attacks happened today itself. So this is the scenario where we are living. Even though if you are using a technology for a very high level of living for different aspects, whether it is online banking or online transporting, whatever it is. At the same time, the attack is also targeting the same services and in internet. So we have to handle those things also, even though we are getting the advantage of internet and the connectivity. Same time, we have to identify how to detect and block some of these attacks. So mainly we are concentrating the talks into that aspects. So basically, this particular section is coming under a network security things. And even though if your FTP program is also exclusively for network security, I'm not going to much on the basics part. So we already know this confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And different attacks happening on confidentiality, like sniffing, password attacks, phishing, social engineering, keylogging, and attacks on availability, like denial of service, distributed denial of service splitting, and integrity, like man in the middle, session hijacking. All those things, it's already covered, I hope. I saw that yesterday's sessions also related to those DDoS and some of these aspects on software-defined networks and latest technologies. So in the network-based attacks, we can see a lot of different category of attacks are targeting the network, whether it is internet or normally connected devices. So network is facing a lot of different types of attacks. For example, remote attacks can be possible on corporate networks through compromised VPN, or it can be capture the unlawful capture of content like spyware, redirectors, phishing, DNS poisoning, and all. And virus, worm, Trojan, these are one of the common things targeting the network because it can spread through the network itself, especially worms and Trojan type of things. Virus, even though if it is required an external entity to transfer the data, but worms is not like that. It is a auto-spreading malicious code from one machine to another machine. It can spread easily. Then another category like denial of service attacks, which will be targeting the availability. That can be very much possible in any network because of the resources are shared and those somebody's want to access that resource. Instead of genuine request, they can give a malicious request, which will overutilize the resources. It can be bandwidth or system resources, all those things. And the another category of attacks like intrusion attacks that we are going to discuss in these particular sessions, and illicit and illegal content related aspects we want to look here in this network access, like routers, switches, and voice attacks, device level attacks. All those things are very much common in nowadays, and it is creating a lot of issues in the genuine usage. And another category, like in inside network attacks, if somebody is there in the inside, it's not from the outside or external entity. Within the network itself, some attacks are possible. Then in the web application category, it's a huge, what do you call the challenge to address these present-day web application attacks, because a lot of attacks categories are there, especially like ingestion attacks, cross-site scripting, cross-site request forgery, then voice command ingestion. Many top-level attacks are targeting the OWASP, Open Web Application Security projects related to web applications. So OWASP itself is a category nowadays. In any security team, they will say like OWASP top 10 is the major attacks in any web application scenario. And wireless scenarios, it's also affecting all those attacks which we have mentioned. On top of that, it will come through the wireless attacks itself, especially like phishing, sniffing, those sniffing type of attacks, because it's unlike our connected medium, it will go through a open channel where sniffing, channel hijacking, all those things are very much possible. So in this context, we are going to discuss about some of these preventive techniques and how this intrusion is happening in the network and what are the possible way to defend it. So we'll call it as in generally in the network security as a perimeter security. So before going to the technical details about perimeter security, we'll just check it before the digital era. What are the attacks possible and how it is prevented in the previous scenario before computers itself is existing. For example, if you see the old ancient fort itself, the very design of that particular fort itself will be a mechanism to prevent some of these attacks. For example, most of the core part is stored here. For example, all those weapons, or it can be in the core part of this port, and it's a surrounding entity. And on top of that, you can see some water body type of things will be there. Suppose if an attacker or somebody is coming from outside, First of all, they are not knowing what is this environment itself. So it is totally unknown to them. I think yesterday they covered the scanning techniques and also how to identify these vulnerabilities and how to do the reconnaissance. So this type of physical reconnaissance they asked to do. Then only they will identify what are the challenges to reach into the core part. So that actually it is taken care by some guards will be there. Then a huge wall will be there for all the force. And on top of that, suppose if somebody crossed that wall itself and they're coming inside, there may be some water body. So the person who's coming inside these walls, they should know at least swimming. And even though if he knows swimming, then this inside the water body, there may be some crocodile type of things will be there. So it's not easy to cross this water body itself to reach in the core part. And from here, multiple what you call security guards will be there that will prevent it like this. So this technology was there in very long time back to prevent the perimeter. So same technology we are applying or we are reusing in the digital world also, where we'll have a perimeter. So in that perimeter, you can consider it's a devices like firewall, antivirus, intrusion prevention system, virtual private network, UTM, all those things are deployed. And if somebody is coming from outside, for example, it's a genuine user, it can be easily passed through. If it is an unknown user, then this stringent checking will be there. It is not easy to pass it. Okay, so you have to do some bypassing, then only you can come inside. So if you see the previous diagram, it is a similar structure. We have some content here inside, that is our credential or assets, whatever digital assets, data, it can be a resource, it can be a bandwidth, whatever resource it is, or whatever asset it is. We want to protect that assets. Mainly our focus is to protect it from outside attacks, where we'll have a perimeter level filtering is doing. So our discussion point today is mainly this point where we will do the intrusion detection in the perimeter. What are the techniques we can apply and how we are going to implement these techniques to do some preventive action and what are the challenges related to that. So here, if you see in the perimeter, there are multiple devices like firewall, antivirus. I'm talking about gateway antivirus, not in the host level antivirus. Typically, we are using the host machine. Here, this antivirus technology is the gateway antivirus, where it will filter all the traffic based on the policies, and it will allow or deny the traffic. Then we'll have a virtual private network, unified threat management system, a web application firewall. Nowadays, there is another device category is coming called the next generation firewall and denial of service and distributed denial of service prevention. Since almost all the traffics are encrypted nowadays, SSL decryption is also happening in the perimeter. So for the inspection part, we'll discuss that in detail in later sessions. Then it will come to the LAN and those things are happening. Communication is happening. And within the LAN or in the host, we have another level of security mechanism. For example, we can install desktop firewalls. We can install desktop antivirus and application and device control in the desktop itself. Then host and IDS, etc. So these are the typical scenario, like we are going to prevent some of these attacks from outside and how we are going to monitor and analyze it. So I'll just elaborate that part now. So if you see this typical topology, from the internet, it will come to the router, then we'll put a firewall or those type of perimeter device. After that, it will go to a intrusion prevention system or a UTM type of device. Then there is a segment called the demilitarized zone. After that, there is a segment called our typical LAN. So in the demilitarized zone, we'll deploy all the machines which is exposed to outside. For example, our web server, mail server, and DNS server. These are the three typical service we want to connect to outside for getting the internet and getting the email. Those type of things has to be connected outside. And since these machines are exposed to outside, we are giving a priority or a critical monitoring and analysis for this device. And in that device, we are kept in a demilitarized zone, where we'll have additional monitoring techniques to analyze this device and its health, its tracking of the connections, all those things will be implemented here. And from there, user can access, the internal users can access their own website, or they can access the outside network through this gateway device like firewall, antivirus, all those things. So this is a typical scenario where we are going to deploy these devices. So the first device from the outside point of view, after router, we'll connect like normally a firewall device. So we'll just touch upon the firewall. It's already known to you, but as a continuation of this session, we'll just touch upon the firewall functionality. So basically, firewall, what I'm talking about, it's called a typical firewall. It is known as packet filter firewall, where it will check the packet header information, typically IP address, port number, and protocol. So based on these 5 fields, we can set a policy. For example, allow the traffic from this particular IP to this particular service, and all other service you can drop it. So firewall will go through the packet header, and it will cross check whether this header is allowed or not. And based on the header evaluation, individual packet, it will allow or deny the traffic. So that device, typically we'll put it in a frontline device, since it is connected to the router, and this typically this can be part of the router itself, like ACL, we'll call it as access control list. So most of the filtering, it can be done from the firewall to use it on the header information. Then the filtering mechanism, it will use like a header. It will cross check with the source and destination IP address, source and destination port numbers, and protocol. So combination of these fields can be the policy, firewall policy. For example, allow the traffic from this source to this destination from this port or to this port, or don't allow any traffic from ICMP protocol. This type of filtering can be possible in the typical firewall, that is a packet filter firewall. Then usually the packet filter firewall will inspect the packet as an individual. It will not identify the sessions, or it will not track the sessions. So the packet filter firewall will concentrate on an individual packet and check it what is the source IP, destination IP, protocol, whether it is allowed or not. If it is not allowed, it will drop the packet, or it will pass to inside. So if you are doing a single packet inspection, then most of these things cannot be identified, because we want to keep track who is coming and what activity is doing and how long is there in the session. Those type of things we cannot simply monitor using a packet filter firewall. So that's what technology is evolved after packet filter firewall. Stateful firewall was there. So it will maintain the state of the connection, and it will, based on the state, it can determine whether this packet was part of the previous connection or new packet, new request. If it is a new request, it will allow based on some parameters. If it is a part of the existing connection, then it will consider the existing connections are there and whether these packets are matching to that parameters. If it is there, it will allow. Otherwise, it will drop that packet. So stateful firewall is a little bit high-end technology it is using compared to the packet filter firewall, and it's of its own complexity and disadvantage. For example, if the state maintenance is one challenge, it's required resources to maintain the state, and somebody can target that itself. For example, if a denial of service attacks, typically Sinflet type of attacks, is coming to a stateful firewall, it has to maintain all the states. So by maintaining the states, if a genuine user's request is not able to add into the state because of this malicious request of DOS or type of attacks, then stateful firewall cannot maintain all those connections itself. Then another category is like application layer firewall or proxy firewalls. Typically, we are using an HTTP proxy or mail proxy. It's a caching, all those additional features, but it can do some level of filtering from there itself. These are the general use of a firewall. So it will filter some of the traffic before coming to the inside network. So then the catch is that typically if you're considering the firewall, as we explained, it will look only into the header part. So header part, like whether it is a IP header or TCP header or UDP header. So from IP header, it will identify IP and port number, IP address. From the TCP or UDP, it can identify the port numbers. And from the IP layer itself, it can identify what is the next layer protocol is using, whether it is TCP or UDP or ICMP type. So the inspection area mainly in the IP and transport layer. So if somebody is doing an attacks inside the content, which can be in the payload or it can be the above transport layer, then firewall will not be able to identify that. Typical firewall will not be able to identify it because its inspection area is limited to those regions. So it will not be able to identify an attacks which is embedded in the payload part. So we require some more device which can be do the detailed inspection, including header as well as payload. So that's what we are using the intrusion detection system or intrusion prevention system. So the typical definition of an intrusion is any intentional event where an intruder gain access that compromise the confidentiality, integrity, or availability of computers or networks to the data residing on them. So if any assets is compromised, its confidentiality, integrity, or availability by an intentional event through a intrusion, then it is a concern. Okay, so we want to monitor those type of activities and we want to prevent it. So intrusion detection system, it's a security device that monitors and analyzes system events for the purpose of finding and providing a real-time or near real-time warning, attempt to access system resource in an unauthorized manner. So this intrusion detection system will monitor and analyze the traffic to identify this type of intrusions, which will compromise the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of the assets inside the network. So this is a typical use case of an intrusion detection system compared to the firewall. So then if you go to the previous diagram, if you analyze this, typically we will deploy our firewall immediately after the router and above the intrusion prevention system. So if you go, we already discussed the firewall, whatever we are using, it's compared to the IPS or intrusion detection system or prevention system, functionality is limited. So then the question will come, still the functionality is limited, why we want to deploy the firewall on top of the intrusion prevention system? Because intrusion prevention system, if you are deployed here, it can do the header as well as payload level inspection. But we are not deploying IPS on top of the firewall. Typically, we are deploy the firewall above IPS from the outside point of view. And over the traffic, first it will cross the firewall, then it will come to the IPS. So the reason is that normally the firewall inspection is limited, so it will be faster compared to the intrusion prevention system. And most of the time, we want to allow some minimal ports. For example, in an organization like academic organization like college or universities, the ports are limited. For example, they want to access the internet, so port 80 or 443 should be open, and they want to connect to the email, so a related port 25 or 110, those ports should be open, and DNS port 53 should be open. So if you deploy the IPS or IDS above firewall, all the traffic will directly come to IDS or IPS. So since it's taking a lot of time for inspection, because inspection area is more compared to the firewall, a firewall will check only the header part. Here it will check the detailed inspection, including payload. The processing overload is high in terms of firewall, in terms of intrusion prevention system compared to the firewall. So since the processing overload is high and it's getting all the traffic, then users will experience a delay because it has to cross multiple strict checking. Then only it can pass the traffic inside to the user. So that checking will take a lot of time if the input rate is very high. So what advantage we are going to get if you're deploying firewall on top of IPS means firewall itself can filter many of the traffic based on IP and port number. So compared to IPS, that filtering is faster because it will check only header portion. And once the filtered traffics are there, then IPS can do the detail analysis. So based on this detailed analysis, it can identify some new type of attacks which cannot be detected by firewall. Still, the load into the IPS or IDS, it will be less because most of the traffic will be filtered from the header itself. So this is the typical way of deployment in the IDS or IPS. It's below to the firewall. Okay, so this is what we explained, like preventive measures stop people from performing certain undesirable activities that can be done using firewall. But once the firewall is allowed a traffic, still the attacks or something is possible, malicious content is possible because firewall is not able to look the detailed analysis. It will typically look only the header part, that to up to layer 4. So above that layers, if there are any malicious contents are there, then firewall will not be able to address it. So accepted traffic can have an intrusion. This is one reason we are using intrusion detection system on top of the firewall, even though firewall is doing some minimal level of filtering. So the accepted traffic by the firewall can have an intrusion. And another thing is that inside attacks are very common because within the LAN itself, if some attack is happening, then firewall is sitting above that. So that input will not be good to the firewall itself. So insider attacks might not be directly detected by firewall. Then another aspect is the detection of a abnormal behavior. So this we'll discuss in detail from the incoming slides. So we'll call it as anomaly detection. So firewall cannot do that type of anomaly detection because it simply pass. Typical firewall will send the traffic based on the individual packet inspection. It will allow the packet based on individual inspection. So it cannot keep track these details, and it cannot identify many of the abnormal things except the packet incoming rate. It can notify, but it might not take an immediate action based on that. So these are the reason why we are using intrusion detection system on top of the firewall, even though firewall is doing an initial level filtering. So accepted traffic by firewall can be have a malicious contents or intrusion. Insider attacks might not be able to detect by the firewall, and abnormal behavior detection. So if you're considering what you call normal scenario, for example, if in your organization, like in your college, there may be a compound wall, and in the compound wall, in the entrance, in the gate, there is a security presence. So what you can typically you will do is that you will check the ID card of the students or persons coming inside the campus. So this inspection area will be just an ID card. So once he's verified this ID card with the person who is coming, maybe he'll look into the face and the photo in the ID and check it whether it is a fake ID or these things as a manual inspection. And he can allow that person inside. And if he's not coming with the ID and he's not matching with the ID with that person, then he can say send out him that before entering the campus itself. So you can map that functionality into a firewall. It's just a minimal checking, and it will do the checking. And once it is verified, it can allow inside. But if you take an example, like if a person is coming and is allowed inside, and then the security is not there in that particular position to monitor it, because individual what you call the department, you might have another security where you will check whether these students is coming to a concerned department or those type of things, and you will do that in level inspection. But within the campus, once it's enter the compound wall, then it's very difficult to monitor by the gate level security. So that's what multiple level securities we are maintaining in different areas, and we are keep track its behavior, whether it is going to a means allowed location or not. Those type of checking we should do. Otherwise, we simply the checking in the gate itself will not work out. So same way, firewall do that initial level checking. Once it is checked, it will come inside. Then IDS or IPS will do the detailed inspection. For doing that detailed inspection, it will apply multiple techniques. Okay, and based on the architecture, we can categorize firewall into three different sections like network IDS, that will be sitting in the network gateway. We'll call it as a perimeter level device. And another one is in the host level. In the single machine itself, we can deploy these IDS. That is HIDS, or host level IDS. And third one is a hybrid IDS, this combination of these two. And based on the detection methodology, we can classify intrusion detection system as two. One is a signature based and second one is anomaly based detection. So we are going to discuss this part in detail now, because this is a core part of any IDS or IPS, signature and anomaly detection, what are the complexities there, and how it is identify some attacks, and how it is able to detect some level of attacks and how it is preventing. So we'll move into the detection technology. Instead of going to the NIDS and HIDS separately, we'll concentrate more on the detection methodology. Okay, so as we explained, there are two different methods for identifying the intrusions. One is the signature-based techniques. Second one is anomaly-based techniques. So signature-based techniques, as we already know, it will use a set of signatures or patterns. So these patterns are known as signatures. These patterns are nothing but it's attack patterns. So these attack patterns are derived from the identified attacks. So that is what it is known as, used as a predefined attack pattern. It is a signature. So assume that in the intrusion detection system, there is a database of non-attacks. And once the new packets are coming, new inputs are entering into the networks, from the gateway, it will cross-check this new input. It's matching to the database of signatures. If it is matching, then we already know this signatures is derived from non-attacks. So it will be an attack pattern. So we will not allow that inside. So this is a simple technology we are using, the signature-based system, where there is a repository of the non-signatures or non-attack signatures, and that signatures are cross-checked with all the incoming packets. If any of these packets are matching with that signatures, then it will reject that packet in terms of IPS, or in terms of IDS, intrusion detection system. It will accept that packet, but it will generate an alert. It cannot take a decision based on that, or it cannot drop the packet. That is the difference between IDS and IPS. IDS is an intrusion detection system. It will dictate and notify the administrator, but action should be taken by the administrator. But IPS is a active device. It's an intrusion prevention system. It can take a decision and it can drop the packet before reaching to the target. So in the signature, we already mentioned, like, it is deriving from the non-attack patterns. Okay. So since it is derived from the non-attacks, or attacks is analyzed and we are deriving the signatures, the accuracy is more, because we are generating this pattern from the identified attacks. So since we are generating this pattern from the attack itself, and after analysis we are deriving it, and we are putting that as in the pattern repository. So if you're comparing with an incoming pattern with that repository, if you're matching both, then the false positive rate is low, because it's a genuine attacks. We can say it is, these attacks are already identified. Because of that, this packet also is an attack packet, so we should reject it. So the false positive rate is less in signature-based attack detection. It will be more accurate. And another advantage is that it is not required any learning. Learning in the sense we are not trained the system to identify what is the normal connections, all those things. It's not required in signature-based things. We have derived the attack patterns, and once that attack pattern is there in this incoming packets, we are sure it is an attack. So in that time, what you call the aspects, it doesn't require any learning, or it doesn't require any training. But the demerit of signature-based attack detection system is, like we already mentioned, it is deriving from the non-attacks. So if it is derived from the non-attacks, then current day attacks like zero-day attacks cannot be detected by signature-based mechanism. because we don't have the attack pattern. It's a new attack. If it is a new attack, we are not able to generate the signatures because typically the generated signatures are generated from the identified attacks. So signature-based detection system is incapable to detect new attacks, specifically zero-day attacks. And another catch is that nowadays all these traffics are encrypted, and this intrusion detection system or prevention system are sitting between the end node and the actual sender. So it is not the targeted system, because targeted system will be, or intended recipient will be the client node sitting after the firewall or after the IDS or IPS. Since it is encrypted, it is an end-to-end encryption. As the device is sitting in between, it cannot do the decryption without the key. So if you are not able to decrypt the packet, then it cannot be identify the attacks, because the attack pattern has to be cross-checked with the incoming traffic. So if it is an encrypted traffic, we cannot identify what is the actual payload, because it will be an encrypted payload. So this application of the signature matching on encrypted payload is not possible. So we want to decrypt the traffic in between the actual sender and receiver. So that will have a privacy concerns. And we, after decryption only, we can cross-check with the plain text with the attack pattern. So if you are cross-checking, we will get an understanding whether this attacks is there or not. So for that, the encrypted traffic, we require a decryption in between the actual sender and receiver. So if that decryption is happening, then privacy is one concern in the present scenario. So like the signature-based technique might not be suggested in a privacy aware network. So in the other aspects, we are looking to that anomaly-based detection system. It will not use any predefined attack signature pattern. What the basic principle of anomaly-based detection is that if any attacks are happening, there will be a behavior change. So whether it is in the system or whether it is in the network, there will be a behavior change. So if you keep track of any behavior change, then you are identify some behavior change. Then we are digging why this behavior changes happen. Is it because of an attack or something else? As our assumption is that any attack will create a behavior change. So we are keep track the behavior change. If behavior change we are identify, then we'll analyze it and identify what is the reason for that. So we will be able to identify an attacks. So this is a typical use case of an anomaly-based system. It can be identify new attacks. Unlike signature-based detection, it will not use any predefined attack pattern, but it has to do the network understanding and behavior thresholding or baseline settings, profiling. So there are multiple keywords people use. So profiling of the network, like identify what are the normalcy and is there any deviation is happening or not. So it will create a baseline and it will define a normalcy. If any normalcy change is happening, it will call it as an anomaly. And because of an attack, also anomaly is possible. Since we are keep track on anomaly, we will identify these type of attacks. Okay. So the advantage is that it will capable to identify new attacks because we are not specific to any attacks. We are looking for a behavior change. And why this behavior change is happening, that is what we are analyzing. So this just like, for example, if you suppose some VM is affected in our machine, just imagine a new VM is affecting in our machine. So the signature we don't have because it's a new VM. We don't have any signature. But in the anomaly, what it will do is that it will check, it's already know the normalcy of a machines or normalcy of a network. So it will identify what is the normal connection going from a machine, what time it is sending, and how long it is taking, what is the duration of this connection, from where it is getting the traffic, these type of multiple parameters it can take. And what is the normal packet size, which port number it is using, all those things it will take. And suddenly if that is changing, then it is a behavior change, it's an anomaly. So we'll check why that anomaly is happening. So you can see if a VM is spreading, then it will send this request or probing request to multiple machines. It can be go outside also. So while keep track this connection request going from a particular machine, suddenly you will see a lot of changes is happening from the request happening from a single machine. So then we'll dig it out why these request changes are happening, why this machine is sending. So the further things we will dig it out. So it may be sending as common pattern to all the machines. Yeah, if it is a common pattern, then it will say monomorphic worms. So if it is a different pattern, you can say it can be a polymorphic worms. So type of new attacks can be identified. So it can be a genuine reason also. I'll explain to that point. So, but here possibility is there more compared to the encrypted, signature-based attack detection, where we are derived the attack pattern based on a signature, based on identified attacks. In this case, we are looking more on behavior-based changes. If change is happening, then we are generating an alarm and analysis happening. So since it is a behavior change based approach, the challenge in the anomaly based detection is that how we are going to set the thresholds, because network behaviors are totally different. And the network which currently we are using, it may not be the same network tomorrow. The application may be changed, more usage may be added, some application will be added. So a lot of change can be happen in a dynamic way. So we cannot set the thresholds in a static manner. It should be a continuous learning mode. Then only we will be able to identify some new attacks accurately. So accuracy is one concern in anomaly-based detection model, where the behavior thresholds or behavior profiling itself is a challenging activity. So we are looking to a behavior change based on the profiling and change in there. So in that context, it will be it can generate false positive as well. So if our profiling is not correct, it can generate a lot of false positive. So accuracy is one concern in anomaly-based detection compared to the signature-based model. However, it will provide a new attack detection mechanism, because we are not looking for from the existing attacks pattern, we are looking for a behavioral change. So in summary, these are the difference between signature-based and anomaly-based system. So I'll put in another context like this instead of intrusion detection in a general scenario. You take an example like how police is detecting or identifying a thief. So assume that this thieves or culprits, they're doing a crime. Maybe a what you call criminals is doing a new crime. This is one example you can say. So then suppose that crime is happened, then people will describe, witness will give the details, like his person is with this type of physique and it's aware this much size and this hair color, all those things will description people can take, police can take. And generally they will have a sketch, they will sketch the persons and they will put it in a say wanted list. Okay. So if some people is already know these persons, it's a non-criminal, then they can easily track it, because this person is already there in our records. They can easily map into that. They can dictate who is done that. Okay, this is as simple as the signature detection. So once the attack is happened, people will give the details. So like suppose suddenly our MS Office is crashing, it will give two options. You can send the report or you can cancel it. For example, if you send the report, then it will go to the what you call the analyzing team. Typically, it will send the memory dump, so they can analyze why this attack is happening from the dump itself. So they can identify some of these patterns created as the issue. So from there, they can generate the signature. This is one way to develop the signatures. So some analysis team, security analysis team, they will analyze this input given by the user. Like that, a single user might have faced an issue now, but other users may have faced the same issue or same bug in the later point of time. So they can analyze easily what are the bugs and how it is happened. Is it because of some specific input or more rate traffic, whatever the reason it is, they can analyze it and they can identify. So once they identify, they will put it as a like our wanted list or lookup notice. They will put it as a signature. So that will be part of the database. So once that is part of the database, then automatically the signature based engine can cross check, since this is coming from a non-attacks, whether it is existing in our incoming packets. If it is there, reject from there itself. Don't allow him to come inside because it's a non-attack pattern. So this is a typical way signature is generating. As police is doing a what you call the lookup notice or wanted list, similar to that, that wanted list you can consider as a signature. So if somebody is identified this pattern in your signature list, it will notify there is a possibility of attacks from this particular IP address. This is a pattern we are receiving. It is already there in the our signature database. It is related to these attacks. Okay, so we can map which attack it is and what is the reason for that. All those things can be easily identified. So as we discussed, it's effective for detecting non-threats, but ineffective for detecting unknown threats. And even though you might have a signature for a specific attacks, but attackers are very smart. They will change the attack pattern very minimal also. Then also our signature by detection cannot be identified because we don't have the variant of the signature. That's what if you see these attacks, most of the attacks or many of these attacks can be the variant of the existing attack itself. So you might have some signature pattern, but that doesn't mean you cannot you can dictate all the attacks from that category, because attacks patterns are changing even though if a minor variation is there, since it is not exactly matching to our signature, it cannot be identified. Okay, so this is the catch in signature based detection. So we can map it like a signature based detection is nothing but like a wanted list or lookup notice put by a police. If something is somebody is identified that person, they will notify. Similar to that, there is a database of attack patterns. If some incoming packets are matching with the database, we'll generate an alert. So that alerts will be there with a network administrator. You will get to know like this IP is trying to access it, or this machine is sending some input. Okay, this is one example or one way to identify the intrusion. The second way, sorry, and the process wise in the signature-based intrusion, these are the typical stages. Like the input is nothing but a packet. We want to collect the packet from the intrusion detection point of view. From the gateway, usually we'll collect. So there should be a packet capture engine. So it will capture the packet. It's nothing but it's collect the packet. And depending on the technology, this collection also will be different. For example, if I'm going to implement an intrusion detection system, then I can use a sniffing techniques because I need not capture the packet inline. So I record a copy of the packet. So I'm just analyzing the packets in a, what you call the offline way, because I'm doing an intrusion detection. I cannot prevent it. So if you are using an intrusion detection system, then this capturing technique can be a sniffing technique, simple sniffing like Wireshark or TCP dump or similar PCAP capturing technique you can use. But if it is an intrusion prevention system, then it is different, because intrusion prevention system has to collect the traffic and it has to analyze it, take a decision, drop the packet if it is malicious. So if you want to drop the packet, then a passive sniffing cannot work, because sniffing will give a copy to you. Actual packet will go to the destination. So if you are sending an actual packet to the destination, then you cannot prevent that attacks. So in terms of intrusion prevention system, the capturing itself will be an inline mode. So that is the difference. Capturing in inline mode, what I meant is that it has to hold the packet until and unless it is clear, it has to hold the packet in the buffer. So delay will be more, and processing optimization is one of the key component in the intrusion prevention system. Capturing is an important portion. Otherwise, if you are going to implement an intrusion detection, nothing to worry, because it's just a copy of the packet. As the original packet will go to the destination, people will also not complain. But the moment if you're converting that into intrusion prevention system, the challenge is that it is an inline mode. Since it is an inline mode, delay, jitter, latency, all those things will matter. because of the processing delay is more, people will complain like my internet is slow. I'm not able to give a transaction like audio video conferencing and all. So all those what you call the hurdles will come if you are going to the intrusion prevention system. Even though if I put a simple keyword like packet capture, depending on the technology, this will be two different things. If it is a capture in IDS, it is a snippy. But if it is a capture in intrusion prevention system, it is a inline mode packet connection. Then we have to decode the packet. Decode is nothing but we have to identify IP address, port number, headers, details, what is the application header. All those details will happen in the decode. Then finally, detection engine will happen. The pattern matching will be for signature, behavior analysis for anomaly. If it is a intrusion prevention system, it will take an action like connection resets or packet drop. If it is an intrusion detection system, it will allow that. So here also, terminology wise, here it will be different. In IPS, it will be a connection reset or packet drop. In IDS, it will be packet allow. It's just a sniffing and packeting is allowed. But both will generate an alert. Even whether it is IDS or IPS, it will generate an alert. Say that IPS will say, I identified these attacks, and because of the criticality of these attacks, as your policy, I drop this packet. IDS will say, this packet is allowed, but this packet contain an attacks. Okay, it cannot take any decision. It can just notify. So typically, people will say like your IDS is just like your CCTV camera. It's have a track, but it cannot take any action. But IPS, you can consider it like a physical security. You can block the people. If he's identified something malicious or some abnormality here, he can stop the people in. But IDS just allow it, and it will say something is happened from this packet, this time, this IP. All those details will be there, but finally attack will happen. In this case, IPS case, attack will not happen because it's a inline device. It can block it. So this is the typical sequence of a packet flow in the IDS or IPS, like packet capturing, decoding, inspection. It's both signature and anomaly. Action, it can be reset the packet or it can allow the packet. It can generate the alerts. If it is a genuine packet, it will close without any alerts. If it is a malicious packet, it will generate alerts in IDS or it will drop the packet in IPS. Okay. Now we'll discuss about anomaly-based intrusion detection. As we mentioned, it's do the profiling and it set a baseline. Any deviation from the baseline considers an anomaly. So our basic assumption is that an attack creates an anomaly. You can see here, if you simply see this diagram itself, we can see some anomaly for this particular case where the fish in red is going to the opposite direction. And all of this are moving into one direction. So that itself is anomaly. We will look into that, why this happened. Is it because of some genuine things or something else? So this is a simple way to look into the anomaly. We'll have a normal tendency or a trend. If something is changing that, then we'll call it as an anomaly. Why that anomaly is happening? Okay, so we'll come to the same example like how police is identifying a thief. As we discussed, there may be a what you call non-attacks, non-lookup notice, all those things. You take another example like police, they will do the patrolling. So the patrolling, usually they will do it midnight or off time, not in a normal daytime, they will not do. The reason is that they want to identify some abnormal things. Usually people will not go to the midnight and the gathering will not be there much. People might not go with weapons, all those type of things in the midnight. So while patrolling, they may identify these type of things. It is not normal. And further, if they catch hold of those some people or gangs, they can question it. They can interrogate. While interrogation, they may identify now. Suppose they might have planned for an attack based on this. They are targeting something else. So those type of things will be get revealed. Like that, in a network also, we'll do a behavior-based analysis. And we may identify some abnormal behavior from the network or from the host or from the traffic or from the application, wherever it is. So then we'll generate an alerts and the inspection will happen. After inspection, we may identify new attacks. So this is the difference. Like suppose if a new gang is starting a planning for a attacks, assume that in the patrolling, the police person is identified the gang. They might not down any crime before, but they're just starting for a new attack, new gang. Those type of things can be identified. Same way, if a new attack is there, since it is a behavior change, we will be able to identify this type of new attacks using the behavior-based model or anomaly-based model. So our catch is that if the traffic is deviated from a non-normal traffic in a particular interval of time, we identify observed an anomalous activity, then we can track it. It's an attack because of this attack is happened. Typically, this anomaly-based model is well suitable for different attacks, which will change the attack pattern or traffic pattern. For example, scanning, flooded attack, DOS and DDoS. These are the important attacks that can be easily identified using anomaly-based model. I just give an example. Like I think previously you have gone through a session like network scanning. I saw from your schedule. So you just imagine a scenario like somebody is using a tool like Nmap for network scanning or reconnaissance. What exactly it will send? It will send us a request to the particular port and verify what is the response it is coming. So it will send an, for example, in the SYN scan, it will send a SYN packet, SYN request to the target port. And based on the response, it will verify whether the port is open or not. If it is getting a acknowledgement back, it will verify that the port is open. And if it is getting a reset packet, it will verify this port is closed. So this is a simple scenario. You just want to detect that scanning. Just imagine I want to detect the network scan from my network. So if you simply check the what you call the request, you cannot identify it because a genuine user also will give the SYN packet as a first request, and here scanning packet also will happen in the same way. So you don't have any specific pattern for that. It's a simple SYN request. Whatever port it is there, SYN flag will be enabled. Genuine request will come with a SYN flag, and this also will come with a SYN flag. So the catch is that your signature-based detection want to detect those type of things. It is difficult because there is no unknown pattern is there or malicious pattern is there. But if you see the scenario, like in the scanning, you will get a traffic to a particular machine, almost all ports, and that is not a normal case. For example, if I using a web server, you typically I'll get a port 80 or 440 is the traffic, and suddenly I'm getting the traffic to other ports. For example, 53, 25, all other service in that particular server. Then your signature cannot be identified because it's a genuine request. The signature cannot map any attack pattern, but your behavior-based model can easily identify because it's already profiled. What is the traffic coming to this web server? Typically, it will get a traffic to port 80 or 443 only. Suddenly, it is getting the traffic from all other ports. It's a behavior change. So it can be identified some attacks are happening or something is changing. It can be because of some attacks. So that is what I want to put this type of example in the behavior-based model, like scanning, flooding attack, those zeros, all those things can be easily detected. In scanning also, there are another combination you can apply, like from how many IPs it's coming, what are the ports it is targeting, what is the response it is going. So typically, if you're taking a normal request response, RST will be very minimal because most of the traffic will come to the open port only. Suddenly, you are getting a lot of RST from a particular machine. That itself is a behavior-based change. So this is what I want to convey. Like behavior-based model will be help you to detect a lot of attacks which cannot be identified using signature. So the combination of these two is mandatory for any intrusion detection or prevention system. You cannot simply depend on ideas with a signature-based model because you cannot identify any new attacks. Even though attack accuracy, detection accuracy is very high in signature, you cannot identify a new attacks. So there is no way to identify a new attack using signature. At same time, you can apply a behavior-based model, but alone behavior-based model cannot do much things because accuracy is one concern there, and it cannot identify the attacks with a very good accuracy until and unless you are not providing any accurate profiling. If your network is very static, it's possible, but if your network is dynamic, it will be difficult. Similar way in the flooding and DDoS, suddenly we'll get a lot of traffic change. You can easily identify. Bandwidth utilization will be very high. It may be targeting a particular port, then it is a DOS attacks. If it is a flooding to all the networks, then it will be a network flooding attacks. So this is a simple example we can consider in the anomaly-based model. And it is not an easy task because I'll give a simple example. It's not related to network. I'll give a real-time example what we going on currently. You take a simple example like in 2019 December. I'm just putting that date. 2019 December. If you go to our road, we will not be able to any person with a mask because if somebody is going with a mask in that type of time, it's an anomaly. Everybody will look him why is he wearing a mask. But suddenly the thing is changed. If you take in 2020, the things are changed because if you nowadays if you see the person without a mask, it is an anomaly. So this today's normalcy cannot be can be a abnormal thing tomorrow, and today's abnormal things can be a normal thing tomorrow. So this is a physical. We have a physical example nowadays. That is also because of the virus, we know, but it's not a network virus, but it's another virus. Same thing is happening in network also, where today's your normalcy can be abnormal thing tomorrow. And in only tomorrow, next second itself, it can be abnormal thing. And today's abnormal thing can be a normal thing tomorrow. I'll give an example. In the physical, like in your university scenario, you're just assuming like your university is going to publish the results of the students in an online mode. So typically your website is getting 100 requests per second, typical in a normal scenario. Suddenly, if you're announcing the results, for example, 5 o'clock today, I'm going to announce the results. You can see a lot of requests are coming at that particular point of time. Because students are eager to know their results, so they want to know. They will come and check it in your website where it is published. If you see the difference between 4:50 to 5 o'clock, it may be a huge variation in the traffic pattern. Like number of requests will be huge in 5 o'clock onwards. Maybe your system also will be unresponsive or some type. These type of things will happen, but we cannot say it is because of a attacks. It's a genuine thing because announcing the results, people want to check it. What is the results? It's a genuine thing. You cannot consider it's a abnormal request. Still, the behavior change is happened, and your system, anomaly-based system, may generate a false positive because if you are not providing this information to your anomaly-based system, it cannot identify it's because of genuine reason or because of anomaly. So typical DOS also will happen in the same way. So assume that the same thing is happened without announcing any results and some other day, then it can be a denial of service attacks. You are getting a lot of requests to your web server, and your web server is become slow. And there is no further activity like a planned activity like announcing the results or some other conference. Something is happening. Nothing is there. Suddenly, if you're getting a lot of traffic, your anomaly detection will say like there is abnormality. I identify it as a denial of service attack. And same system will say, while announcing the results, also I identified an attack. It is a denial of service attack. It cannot distinguish these two. Even though if it is a genuine case, it cannot identify it until and unless we are providing this information to the system. So automating this, it will be difficult, and since every network is a very dynamic, because today you may add a more number of students. One batch of students are coming, for example, in the next semester. and their attack means access pattern may be different. And suddenly they are using some other application. If you see the what you call the access pattern in our network, pre-COVID era and post-COVID era, this like online classes was not there in the previous scenario like this. Nowadays, if you see the traffic, almost all the traffic will be like your WebEx or MS Team or whatever that online media type of things. So I cannot fix a threshold like this is the application I'm going to use or this is the traffic pattern. It can be changed at any point of time. So your anomaly-based detection system may generate false positive in that context because as per its definition, these all are anomalies. It cannot identify whether it is a genuine request or anomalous request. So this is the challenge in anomaly where we will not able to track it whether this anomalies because of genuine or some manual intervention is required. Still, we can fine tune it. Nowadays, different technologies people are applying like machine learning, deep learning, all those things. It will improve the accuracy, but still it's a concern compared to the accuracy compared to the signature-based model. So if you see the sequence, first we have to identify the normalcy. And whatever way we have identified, that is a research topic, like whether you are applying a learning-based mechanism or statistical model, different technologies are there. Our interest is to set the threshold for a normalcy. Then any deviation from the normalcy, it can be considered as an anomaly. So anomaly can occur due to different attacks. So we want to segregate what type of attack it is. It can be a scanning, threading, or DOS, DDoS, or malicious request, or a Trojan, whatever reason it is. So we'll do the attack analysis. After attack analysis, it may be a new attack. So we can derive a pattern from there itself. So your anomaly detection system may enhance the capability of signature-based detection. Like it can provide or it can derive a new attacks signature itself. It may not be generated automatically, but it will help the human being to say like a new attacks is happened. You can analyze this topic. Okay. So then if you're analyzing it and identifying a pattern, it can be a part of the signature in the next time. So we identify new attacks, it will be part of the signature. Next time the same attack is happening, we'll be able to block it. So it will complement each other. Your anomaly-based detection will system complement the functionality of signature, like it will add a new signature for a new attacks. So this is a what you call the balancing. So it will have a your system should have both signature as well as anomaly-based model. Okay, so I hope these points are clear, like what are the different techniques and all. Now we'll discuss some of the challenges present day traffic, how we are addressing and what are the mechanisms we can use it. So one is that the network traffic's growth. And second one is, as we mentioned, like we want to collect the traffic for any analysis, whether it is intrusion detection or intrusion prevention or firewall, whatever it is. First of all, we have to capture the traffic. And capturing and decoding the packet in a high-speed network, that is one of the research challenges. And deep packet inspection, like as we mentioned, the payload we have to do the inspection. So accurate, faster pattern matching techniques. It's one of the key research in this security domain, especially in intrusion detection. How to handle encrypted traffic. Then on top of the traffic classifications, I think this already covered the next point, SIEM type of things, traffic monitoring, event correlation, and visualization. And even though if you're addressing all those things, nowadays these attacks are not like the previous type of attacks. It is stealthy attacks, low and slow attacks, advanced persistent threats. So those type of attacks also is increasing nowadays. So it's very difficult to handle those type of attacks. Even in detection, it's very difficult. Then only it will come to the prevention. We are not able to identify those type of attacks using the present technologies. So we want to do some level of research to enhance our system to identify these type of things. We'll discuss some of these points now. Okay, first point, we'll discuss the traffic growth, how we are going to handle. So I'll just do a minimal calculation for this, how much traffic we want to process. So for that calculation, I have taken a 64-byte packet. This, as you can see, it's a minimal size packet. So there are two catches in minimal size packets. First one is that in the inspection size, it will be very minimal because usually it will contain only header, minimal payload part. So your pattern matching things might not be complicated for the lower size packet. But the lower size packet will create a lot of overhead in the packet capturing time because everything is a new request. So there may be a system limit. You cannot exceed beyond that. If you see any data sheet of the products, the highest performance they will claim for the higher size packet. And the lower size performance, even though if it is a 10G device, they will say that 10G interface we are getting 6 Gbps using 10.054 byte packet, but 64-byte packet we are getting maybe 800 Mbps. So the unity itself will be less because there are a lot of challenges for capturing, decoding the packets. If the number of packets are very high, it will be very challenging. So that's why typically in the lower size packet, it will be very difficult to handle the line speed. So in the calculation, from a 10 Gbps traffic, this much packets are there with the 64 byte. And if you simply do a per packet calculation, per packet analysis without any buffering and all, it will get only 48 nanoseconds. So that means within 48 nanoseconds, you have to clear a packet with all your inspection, pattern matching, whatever it is. You have to clear the packet. Then only what you call next packet can accommodate. It can be done in a land speed. So this is a very challenging thing. I'm not talking about 100G and 40G. I'm just talking about 10G itself. Okay, but nowadays 10G is very common. 100G and 40G are one of the means most of the data center they're using. So if you want to do those type of analysis, it's very difficult using the traditional model. So we want to go for a different technologies to get into high-speed network things. As I mentioned, it will start from multiple things. Even our simple network capturing card, NIC itself has to be fine-tuned. Once you capture where it is going to the operating system. Operating system has to be changed to get the high-speed packet processing, to make it ready for the high-speed packet processing. And once the voice is there, then we may take the packet from there itself. And our monitoring application has to be analyzed in the faster manner. Monitoring application, I'm not talking about simple monitoring, but it's analysis, including signature, all those things. So signature is one of the complex aspects because where we are doing the pattern matching, we want to do not only one pattern. If you want to cover different type of attacks, nowadays 10,000 to 20,000 is the average number of signatures in any IDS will be there. So you just imagine a single packet itself is comparing with 20,000 signatures in a fraction of seconds. It's not an easy task. So wherever this delay is there, automatically that will be what you call propagate to the ultimate users. So if your network capturing have a delay or a network interfacing card is not fine-tuned properly, or your monitoring application is not able to handle the traffic rate, then it will go to the end user. He'll complain like my network is slow. So there are different technologies or applied for this high-speed packet processing. Hardware-based approach like ASICs, application-specific integrated circuits. Network processors are there, specific for this what do you call it? Designed for high-speed packet processing. And another terminology nowadays people are using like SmartNIC. In our lab also we are using these technologies like SmartNIC based technologies. And in the software itself, like if you are using a simple Linux kernel, you can do a lot of fine tuning for high-speed packet capturing. Nowadays, a lot of kernel bypassing technologies are there, like DPDK, Data Path Development Kit, and NetMap, PFRing, etc. Different libraries are available for high-speed packet processing using software itself. And typical multi-threaded application using multi-core system, you can parallelize to some extent. It can be reduced level of high-speed packet processing even in a normal commercial off-the-shelf systems. using a multi-core processor itself. Then GPU is another technologies. And in the high-speed packet processing techniques using the hardware technology like ASICs network processors are very much there in the market nowadays. So where in the ASIC, it is a well-designed ASIC can be much faster than CPUs, but difficult to develop because it's a hardware level circuitry we have to develop. It's not that much easy to program on all those things. And once it is programmed, it's difficult to change also. So like a general purpose CPU, we cannot get that much flexibility. In the network processes, it tries to bridge the divide between ASICs and CPUs. Some level of programmability is there, but it's not as fast as ASICs, but it's programmable, and compared to CPU, it's better performance will give. And the present technology people are using is a SmartNIC. The reason is that its programmable aspects, it's compared to other ASICs or all those things, it's very minimal. Even if we can simply load the C generic language like C program into the card, and it can be do the high-speed level processing. So the SmartNIC, what exactly it will do is that it will offload the computationally expensive functionality into the normal NIC card itself, NIC itself. So it's nothing but it's a NIC card. It will have a standard packet capturing technology, like it's multiple ports is there, and on top of that, it's have a processor. It can be ARM processor or it can be a FPGA, whatever it is. And this processor, we can program it. You can do the packet processing within the card itself. So it need not go to your host machine. And this card you can insert in a server class machine, typically in the PCI slot, where it will capture the packet, analyze it, then you can send it outside. So all the process intensive operations or computationally intensive operation, packet capturing, decoding, analysis, can be offloaded to the SmartNIC, and that output, other functionality like management, GUI, all those things can be done in the CPU in the host machine. So CPU's overload is reduced. It can be offloaded into the SmartNIC, and it can be do the packet processing in high speed. So this is the one approach. If you want to switch into from software to hardware, this is the intermediate approach where all your software-based code can be protected here. Nowadays, these SmartNICs are supporting C, C++ program itself, and FPGA-based SmartNIC we have to write in a Verilog or a related hardware language. So code-wise, it is very easy, and functionality-wise, it will be compared to the traditional ASIC standard. It will not provide as fast as that, but still compared to the CPU, it will offload some of the functionality, so it will be faster. And nowadays, these SmartNICs are available from 25G to 100 plus G. So using this itself, we will get a higher packet throughput. So other approach is a software-based approach where if you simply analyze the packet processing in the software, and if your packet is coming to the system, operating system, typically it is an interrupt to the operating system. So once the interrupt is there, then automatically that interrupt has to be handled. So if you compare to any other input, the packet rate at which it is sending or receiving in the receiver side, that itself is very high. For example, in 1 Gbps, you can imagine how many packets will come per second. So that much interrupt your system is generating, and your voice has to handle that interrupt. It is very difficult to handle in a typical voice itself. So instead of that, your kernel, if you handle this type of things as an interrupt, it is very difficult to provide high speed. So what people are doing that they will bypass the kernel to handle this type of packet processing things. So it can be bypassed into user space. So that is what kernel bypassing approaches are using nowadays in the software side. So it will eliminate the overhead in kernel network stacks, moving protocol-based processing into the user space applications. Okay. So I'll give some example like data plane development kit. This is one library is available for Intel. It is known as DPDK. So this approach, it will bypass the entire kernel things, and it's not like interrupt based things. Okay, it's like a polling based approach. So unlike our typical packet processing in the OS, there should not be any interrupt handler type of things. It can be handled without the help of the kernel itself. And another thing is that NetMap is another library which we can use for high-speed packet processing. So if you simply imagine like if you want to sniff the packet in a high speed, for example, a 1 Gbps itself, you can run a Wireshark in 1 Gbps network and identify whether it will be able to handle it. There may be fine tuning is possible, but it's very difficult to handle even sniffing itself in the 1 Gbps traffic using the standard libraries. So like TCP dump or Wireshark, if you're running in a high-speed network, it will be hard for a long period. And on top of that, we are doing all this analysis, all those things. So it will be very difficult to handle it. So in the kernel level. So that's what the kernel bypassing techniques are applied nowadays. So I'll give an example how the DPDK is working. You can see in the left side, this is a standard way of packet processing. From the NIC, it will go to the network driver. From there, it will get the stack inside in the kernel space, where we'll use the user space application, and it will process from there. But however, in kernel bypass, what happened means it will bypass entire kernel. So from the NIC, directly it will go to the user space. Then the question will come, how it will get the packet, because here the network drivers are there. So in the DPDK, there are its own what do you call it? Drivers are there. This is known as PMD driver, port mode drivers. So instead of the network drivers inside the kernel, this will be handled in the DPDK. So any kernel bypass mechanism should have their own mechanism to handle this one. So their own drivers will be there on top of their own libraries. So remember, we are bypassing the entire kernel TCP/IP stack. So whatever the kernel functionality provided in the TCP/IP stack, it should be implemented in the bypassing library itself. Okay, so that is a challenge here. Like all the TCP/IP stack implementation should be there. But since it is designed for a high-speed packet processing, it can be configured or fine-tuned to do the high-speed packet processing in the software itself. So this is the beauty of that. So we need not require any high-end servers. You can use the existing software. Only thing is that your network card should support DPDK. That is the only requirement. All the network card is nowadays not supporting DPDK. So while selecting that, we should careful like whether the network card, whatever the basically it is capturing, whether it is supporting DPDK or not. If it is supporting DPDK, then almost all the kernel bypassing you can use this DPDK based approach. So the interrupt, all those things which we have discussed previously, it will be bypassed by these things. So it will get a high speed packet processing while bypassing the kernel. This is one approach in the software side people are using nowadays. Okay, another one is the express data path, because most of the things before going to the kernel itself we can do from the network card itself. So that is what the filters, mappers, even a typical firewall things you can directly do from the card itself, NIC itself. So that is, it is known as express data path. And you might have heard about the BPF programs. Typically, all those BPF filters we are giving Wireshark, TCP dump and all. It is just like a what you call a virtual environment where it is using its own registers and all. If you are simply put like a protocol TCP in Wireshark to filter out the TCP traffic, internally what happened means it's using as a BPF filter. So Berkeley packet filter. So this is inbuilt is there in all the Linux kernels. Nowadays it is extended to provide a higher capacity, like instead of 16 bits registers, that virtual environment is increased with the 64 bits registers. So the functionality wise increased, and it is known as extended BPF. So this extended BPFs can be filter many of the traffic from the normal network card capture itself. If your network card is supporting BPF or eBPF, So this is one way. Instead of overloading your kernel, you can what you call fine tune your network card to do some level of processing in the kernel. In the card itself. Okay. This is one approach people are using. Okay, on top of the challenge like packet capturing and classification is another major research topic nowadays, because if you see your traffic nowadays, almost all traffics are coming from port 80 or 443. It's like a web traffic, but internally it's not web traffic. Your YouTube is getting through web, your mail is getting through web, your audio video conferencing is going as a web application traffic, but actually it is not web application traffic. So we want to segregate this traffic and classify it what exactly it is, whether it is audio video, whether it is a normal browsing, or it is any other streaming applications. We cannot put a policy until and unless we are not clear what type of traffic it is there. So this is one of the key challenges in the present security environment. If you want to block any YouTube or type of things, if your firewall is not supporting our next generation firewall features, if you simply put a filter based on 80 and 443, your other traffic also will be blocked. So classification is one of the key features, and most of these attacks you can narrow down based on the application itself, because many of these applications have a vulnerability and people are attacking those vulnerability. So if you want to narrow down those level of policies, your classification is mandatory, or traffic filtering is mandatory. For example, you want to identify this is HTTP traffic, then apply a HTTP signature on that. That will be more accurate, instead of simply assigning port 80 and assuming that it is HTTP traffic. So that assumption will not work nowadays, because nowadays these applications are designed in such a way that any application can run in any port. So the previous mapping will not work. Port 80 need not be HTTP. Port 443 need not be HTTP. Yes, it can be any other traffic. So identify the traffic is very much important to apply the policy and doing the intrusion detection. So as you mentioned, challenge is encrypted and encoded traffic and port independent architecture. So traditional security measures may fail to map the actual application. If they are simply binding the port to application, it will not work nowadays. And deep packet inspection, as I mentioned, here the pattern matching is the core part, and efficient pattern matching is one of the what you call need of the hour for any security device, whether it is hardware-based pattern matching or software-based pattern matching. Pattern matching is a core part of any security device, whether it is firewall or whether it is a UTM, IDS or IPS, even in a simple what you call the antivirus system. The core part, if you consider, if it is signature matching, it's a pattern matching engine. So this not like a typical pattern matching. We have to do the high speed pattern matching, because the incoming rate is very high. We have to do the pattern matching in very high speed. So efficient pattern matching, lightweight pattern matching. It's one of the key research topic in any security aspects. And on top of that, pattern matching, we cannot simply do a standard pattern matching. It should be with a regular expression, because most of the signatures will contain a regular expression. It's not like a standard what you call it, without regular expression. So regular expression is one of the key components. So with the regular expression, how fast we can do the pattern matching, that will decide whether our signature pattern or signature matching will scalable to the high-speed network or not. Obviously, the next thing challenge is that how to design accurate signature definition. Because as you simply map like a lookout notice, if you simply put a one keyword, a person is with a 6.2 feet height, many people will match into that. So police cannot identify or you cannot pinpoint the actual culprit. So if you simply see the lookout notice type of thing, it will be more elaborate. His eye color is this one. You have this what do you call it? Some mark in his head. Those type of detailed description will be there, because it will provide accurate information. Similar to that, our signature also should be very accurate. Otherwise, it will generate false positive. So your signature definition should be accurate. To derive the actual accurate signature is one of the key challenges, because it's require a lot of analysis from the attacks data. Then only we can derive it. If it is a very vague signature, then it will not be a useful signature. Because ultimately we are discussing about a attack pattern and dropping it. So if you are going to drop a genuine packet, it will be difficult things to address the user's requirement. And encrypted traffic, as I mentioned, without decryption, if you are going to do, then that will be the best things. And there is a challenge in that because we are sitting in between the end user on this one. If you want to do the decryption without the key, it is not that much easy, even though people are talking about different encryption techniques and decryption techniques, polymorphic type of things. But in the practical scenario, it will be difficult. So nowadays approaches are there, even without decryption, at least to classify the traffic, some good approaches are there using machine learning and deep learning. It will provide to some extent the accuracy. At least you can classify the traffic. Even though if you are not able to decrypt it, you will be able to classify the traffic. But the catch is that as any anomaly-based detection model or learning-based detection model, false positive and false negative is the trade-off. We have to balance these two. Okay. Traffic monitoring and visualization, I'm not going to spend because I understand that SAM is a dedicated session they already taken. So correlation is the key aspects here. Even your multiple device will generate alerts, but to identify the useful alerts, a lot of correlation has to be there. So to do that correlation, my AI, DL, statistics, multiple things are there. And this is the catch. It's very less addressed nowadays. And this should be the what you call in future things, because the attacks like APT, advanced persistent threats. If suppose I am using an Nmap scanning, within 1 second I may get the results. But just imagine same Nmap have a feature to do the scanning in a very slow manner. It may take 1 week to scan a one machine. If I do in that way, then a traditional network monitoring or a scanning detection technique cannot identify it, because the rate itself, what attacker is sending is very low. So there is no behavior change if you consider the traffic rate. Since there is no behavior change, you will not be able to identify as an anomaly. And anyway, these genuine requests are sending in a very slow manner, so signature cannot detect. So this is a challenge in the current scenario, like advanced persistent threats. It will take long time to do it. It's generally happening for a targeted environment. That is more concern because it will not be generated. For example, it's a highly confidential target. If somebody is doing a APT, then most of the credentials they can do, they can get it. It will be what you call the impact will be very high. So targeted attacks is one of the common technique is APT. Very slow they will do. It's advanced level things. Traditional things cannot be identified. So this is a key challenge. We have to address these type of things as a research community, how we can address this type of APT, slow scanning, slow dose, DDoS type of things. Okay, before wind up, I'll just give some recent, what you call technologies or discuss about these perimeter things. In the perimeter, nowadays people are talking about perimeter is vanishing. If you simply see the assumption of the perimeter, as we start from the ancient fort itself, we are trusting the inside people. And we are thinking like all the attacks are coming from outside. If you remember that fort design, the people can be inside, assume that if somebody inside itself is doing a malicious thing, it cannot be do anything, because it's a trusted person, is inside member, and is already part of the system. If he's doing, we are not worried to monitor those type of things. So the same assumption we have used for the perimeter-based design also, because most of our filtering is happening from the gateway. We are assuming that attack is coming from outside, and it will be filtered from the gateway, and we are believing all the inside people, or we are trusting that inside people. This was very good to some extent for a previous scenario. Why I'm telling is that if you take the current scenario, okay, current scenario, especially after the introduction of the cloud and those type of things, that is around some years back, but very recent, the after COVID. What happened means the resource what we are going to use, it need not be in our premises. Simply example, like if a user, if you are giving a mobile phone or laptop and he's doing a work from home, here ultimately you are accessing our network, which is what you call secured by a perimeter device. But once you are inside using a VPN type of things, and this device is vulnerable, then attack can be very much possible. So he may be using his own mobile phone, which might not be control of your organization. He may be using his laptop from his network, home network, connecting through a VPN. So we don't have any control on that. So this is one scenario. Second scenario is that the organization resources are not inside the organization, because most of the resources are kept in the cloud nowadays, and they are securing it. So if it is a cloud-based approach, the perimeter what we defined in the earlier scenario, it will not have any impact. So that is what the perimeter is vanishing nowadays. So the traditional approach which we are going to use in the perimeter, we are trusting inside people and we are not trusting outside people. So the trusting inside people will have an impact in the current scenario. That trust can be the vulnerability. This is a catch. So if you are trusting inside people, whether you are trusting its device or whether you are trusting its own entity or your identity, and that trust itself can be a vulnerability, because if he is using a vulnerable device and you are allowing that device inside your network, and once that device is connected inside, that vulnerability can be exploited or it can be spread to other device also, other network also. So totally internally the entire system can be compromised. So as we know, in the security, we are as strong as the weakest link. So if one machine is compromised, we have to assume that the entire network is compromised. So that's what we are doing a VAPT. We want to identify where is a vulnerable point and we want to patch it or we want to strengthen it. So this scenario, like in the perimeter, what we are considering, it's everything is inside is trusted. That trust itself be the vulnerability in the present scenario. So that's what people are moving into a zero trust model. So this zero trust is a current buzzword. Functionality wise, what it will do is that it will not trust anything, whether it is inside or outside. It will not segregate in trust point of view. All are untrusted, or there is no trust between the device, whether it is inside or outside. There is no trust between the user's identity, whether it is accessing from inside or outside. There is no difference. Everybody is treated as equal, like outsider. So that is what the zero trust. So if you are treated everybody as an outsider, we have to do a stringent checking, authentication, authorization, all those things you have to evaluate. Otherwise, you in a present scenario, what happened means, this IP is inside IP, so we will not do much level of testing. But in zero trust, there is no exception like that. Whether it is inside or outside, everybody is not trusted. So put maximum what you call inspection in any device or any user, any access. So this is a zero trust what you call concept. And once you want to provide an access, don't provide any access for long time. Provide only least privileged access. Whatever is requested, only provide that. There is no root access, nothing like that. Even though if it is a root user, provide whatever service you want to enable only that particular point of time. Okay, so it will reduce a lot of lateral movement. I think there is a separate section on lateral movement in your this one FTP. So they will discuss more on that. So it will reduce the lateral movement once you are given the access. Provide only least privilege, least time required. Don't provide for a long time. Whatever time is required for doing that access, give only for that particular time. That's all. So least privilege, and shift the emphasis from the perimeter of a network to the discrete application and service within the network. Don't trust the network perimeter. Perimeter is vanished, and trust has to be go for the individual host, or what you call it, trust measures should be implemented in the individual host level or individual application level. So even though in the same machine, two applications are communicated, authenticated, you already know it is from the same machine, but don't assume that it is a trusted entity. Authenticate it or authorize it. Like that, if you are going to implement that approach is known as zero trust. Don't trust anything, whether it is inside or outside. Treat them equal as an outsider. So this terminology nowadays is coming, and people are moving towards this one. Actually, this terminology is implemented a long time back. In 2010 itself, this keyword is derived. Google and all, they have implemented this technology in 2014 itself. Okay, but the commercial mode, or what you call perimeter things are vanishing, especially in the current scenario, cloud environment and this work from home, all those type of things. This technology is getting popular, means popularizing nowadays. So this is the general things. I think I already close 10 minutes. Sorry for that. Okay, so just conclude with this cartoon. So what I want to convey is that whatever security device you are going to deploy, it's just like a one way of protection. But ultimately, as you remember, we are as strong as the weakest link. Human being is the weakest link in general. So train the users or give their proper training to how to handle it, and let them understand what is the complexity. Then they will take some responsibility. That's all. Otherwise, you can deploy high-end devices like intrusion detection, prevention, and all. And if your administrator is setting a simple password like admin 123, that device is nothing like just like a what you call it, device is not there. So this is the catch I want to mention. Like even though these security devices are there, finally it is coming to the weakest link. Most of the time, it will be a human being. Thank you very much. And if you have any queries, you can send my mail. This is my mail ID.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Muralidharan, sir.
Yeah, I'll just stop sharing. Is there any specific queries related to slides? I'll open. Otherwise, I'll stop sharing.
Yeah, I would ask the audience if there is any questions you can participants can raise. Okay. I hope there is no any questions, sir.
Oh yes, sir.
Yeah. We would like to thank you, sir. Thanks from Department of Electronics and Telecommunication Engineering, BIT, RVS, for giving such a valuable discussion on detection and mitigation techniques in networking. And we had I hope participants gained a lot of knowledge towards that. And we would like to thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Allah. So if you have any queries there, I will just mention my mail ID.
Sure, sir.
I just put it in the chat box. You can send this one. Okay. So thank you, Allah. It was a nice session. So thank you very much. Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah.
There is a link for today's quiz and also the feedback for session 4. It is already been posted in chat box. I request all the participants to click on those links and please submit the form. Okay. So we'll all meet for tomorrow's session. Thank you. Thank you all.